Hard to believe the 13th anniversary will soon be upon us on Thursday. On Thursday, I'm going to do a 4th hour live out of the new TV radio studio. We will be moving in there full-time very, very soon, but also using the studio some as well. Won't really be able to tell any difference if you're a radio listener. We do simulcast at Infowars.com/show with the free video feed. And the nightly news, of course, for subscribers, PrisonPlanet.tv. As we've grown our base of reporters and researchers, investigative journalists, thanks to all of you out there supporting us and spreading the word in a team effort. Where to start? I've just got to go over all this news today. So much of it is just incredibly important. The filmmaker and researcher has done it again. Mr. O'Keefe, who I want to work on getting on the broadcast, James O'Keefe, dresses an Ebola-infected ISIS terrorist to sneak across Lake Erie from Canada to Cleveland and into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame without being challenged once. Just showing that the hundreds of billions spent a year, hundreds of billions of dollars on, quote, intelligence is all a giant joke, ladies and gentlemen. And the entire Homeland Security system, he was dressed up in an Al-Qaeda outfit, in a frog boat, in a Navy boat, an inflatable, drove in and simulated basically smuggling in ricin, Ebola, you name it, to draw attention to the fact that our border's wide open. And I imitate anything that's successful. That's why we sent Joe Biggs down to the border last week to show that he could simulate a beheading right outside downtown El Paso, dressed as an ISIS fighter, and then come across with an ISIS flag and declare America for ISIS, basically. It is stunts like these that illustrate how ridiculous. In fact, we ought to simulate, you can go to an Army-Navy store or buy them online, a used rocket launcher. I got to think about this, though. There could be some legal issues, but anybody could do it. I don't recommend you do, folks, before you think it out. I'm just brainstorming. And go sit out on the edge of an airfield where planes are at 5,000 feet, dress as a jihadi, and simulate shooting it down to illustrate that 15,000 MPADs have been given to Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Syria, now known as ISIS or IS. And that leads us to the next story here. By the way, that's something Navy SEALs famously have done a lot to show that embassy security is wide open or not being followed properly by the Marines that guard them. The Navy will run its other naval commandos, that's just another branch, basically, up against the Marines and try to have them get into the base and simulate blowing it up or killing people. Again, we're just here illustrating, James O'Keefe is here illustrating, that it's all security theater and a giant joke. Alex Jones here with a very important announcement for truth seekers. We've carried a lot of amazing films and books over the years on the online video bookstore at Infowars.com. And out of all the titles we've carried, one stands out because it is just so chillingly convincing. And that's Dreams from My Real Father by Joel Gilbert, available at Infowars.com. This film exposes the fraud that Obama is like nothing I've seen. If you want to know who Obama's real daddy is, this is the film for you. Don't forget, your purchase supports our broadcast and our growing media network. You'll also find at InfoWarsShop.com None Dare Call a Conspiracy by Gary Allen, the book that woke me up. We're also carrying Behind the Green Mask, You in Agenda 21 by Rosa Corey. This book is coffin nails to the globalist takeover. The Greater Good, the most professional and up-to-date film I've ever seen exposing the scourge that is vaccines. These titles and a lot more are all available at InfoWarsShop.com. We have Lew Rockwell of LewRockwell.com, Ron Paul's former chief of staff and one of the top libertarians in the world, joining us to give his perspective on military strikes on ISIS and what his breakdown is on Rand Paul endorsing military action. I rarely have mixed feelings on an issue like this, but it's very complex, and at the bottom of my gut, I want to see a massive air campaign against al-Qaeda. That's who they are. But there's the rest of the story that I'm going to break down that's public information and that is so sensationally evil that if the public could ever grasp it, and the public's close to grasping it, it will bring down the entire power structure. Just like the pedophile scandal in England could bring down the royal family, the entire government, the whole system as well. The globalists, these different dynasties are not invincible, but if we are invincibly ignorant and invincibly passive and invincibly stupid and are in comas and basically in trances, then we don't have any hope of ever changing anything. In fact, the only change you're going to see is things degrading, situations deteriorating and rotting very, very quickly. Let me give you a bottom line summation without going into a long history lesson for new people that just tuned in of what's happening. There have been radical, jihadi, expansionist, imperial Muslims since the time after Muhammad's death, the founder of Islam. They're in what is Saudi Arabia today. But there have been moderate versions of Islam. There have been many different configurations of that. The Ottoman Empire that was able to take over Constantinople and the headquarters of the Byzantine Empire in what is Turkey today. There's a long history there. But in World War I, you saw different power structures fighting on different sides. The world witnessed the Turks allied with the Germans. So there was a battle over who could control the Arabs and who could control the Muslims and who would snap up the pieces that were left at the end of World War I. British intelligence goes in and creates what is Saudi Arabia today. That's on record. By arming Bedouin tribes who could only be described as bandits, as desert and hill people who lived in basically 3,000-year-old style dwellings, open-air tents. These are the people British intelligence set up. These are the people that now dominate Islam worldwide. And they were undoubtedly involved in 9/11. They were undoubtedly involved in the ISIS takeover of Syria and now Iraq and Libya. They are publicly giving the weapons to them. Now, when Hitler took over the Middle East and North Africa in World War II, he got the keys for about 3-4 years to the Muslim Brotherhood and the Caliphate and all these different groups. And then as soon as Hitler was defeated, the keys to the city of Islamic extremism were given again into the hands of British intelligence. They used radical Islam to overthrow the secular government of Iran. Then they double-crossed the Muslim extremist and put the Shah in. Then they double-crossed him and put the Ayatollahs in. Yes, they put them in. Iran-Contra deal, all of it. but it's lots of double and triple crossing. And here's the bottom line. That type of culture creates squalor and creates pain and creates unstable civilizations. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend is not the way to live. Machiavellian politics were similar in what is Italy today, with the different city-states constantly fighting with each other and changing alliances and everyone having to live in armored fortresses because they might be killed any minute. It's a very unstable way to run your society. And the black nobility, the Venetian black nobility that basically ran to Scotland and to England about 700, 800 years ago, when people weren't sure if the Arabs weren't going to be able to successfully take over Italy, like they'd done Constantinople and what is Turkey today. So a bunch of those rich people ran out of Italy, and they all ran to basically England and France and Scotland. And so the system we live under is cutthroat, manipulative, triple dealing, triple crossing, no honor, incredibly corrupt. It's the system that Italy was under, and I'm just giving you basic gestalts here, after the fall of Rome in 410, when it was Byzantine. Again, Italy, what is Italy today? Not run out of Italy, but run out of what is Turkey. It was Christian. It's not the Roman system they had before that was based on honor and family and tradition. That then again was corrupted in the decline of the Roman Empire. The point I'm getting at here is this mindset of being cutthroat and backstabbing and dishonorable, that's what I call it, is not only centered in and around Saudi Arabia. Those forms of thinking also have been going on in Europe for a very long time. And you have the Machiavellian school that is in direct competition with what you would call the school of Western chivalry, which is based on being honorable and stable and truthful and everything being your family name and never double dealing. But there was plenty of treachery went on as well in Western Europe. There's just different schools and different systems. Our government has a Machiavellian, or almost Arabian, you could also call it, system of looting and betrayal and dishonor and double and triple dealing. See, I said I'd get into a short history lesson, and then it starts turning into a long one because these issues are so deep and so complex, but also so simple. Here's what I'm getting at. The West didn't want stable, secular, upright, prosperous Middle Eastern countries. There was a major school of that there going back to the time of Egypt and before. Mathematics, so many of the sciences developed, invented there. Very high IQs, smart people. But that has all been removed and turned over to the Saudi Arabian extremists. And that's what the West wants, is a bunch of backwards, barbarous, suppressed people that they can then use to menace the West so the establishment can then take our basic liberties here. So when you hear about Ronald Reagan or Jimmy Carter, quote, creating Al-Qaeda and having them attack the Russians, they didn't create them. There was a relationship going back to British intelligence before that, again, specifically in Afghanistan, not just in Saudi Arabia. And so when we then see Obama caught with Benghazi, giving 15,000 surface-to-air IMPAD missiles that can shoot down aircraft all day long, and all these other weapons to the Al-Qaeda rebels in Syria, and the whole thing that's happened in Iraq, all of it has been orchestrated by the globalists in D.C., in London, in Tel Aviv, in Istanbul, formerly Constantinople. And so there is no debating that the people running our government planned this whole deal. This war against ISIS is totally staged. The only reason it's happening is that there's such public education now about who really runs this and that it's al-Qaeda. They changed the name 2 or 3 times to IS, to ISIS, back to IS, now to the Caliphate, back to the Caliphate, to confuse you. And they'll show a truck getting blown up every few days with nobody running away from it, with no big explosions around it. Clearly, this is all staged. And they did this when they invaded Afghanistan in 2001. That's why we, quote, won in a week, because they would just have 14-year-old conscripts up front in grids that our troops could bomb, when the real Taliban and al-Qaeda was then paid in gold, put on U.S. C-130s, flown out to safety in Pakistan. It was called the airlift of evil. So they just repeat all this over and over again. So when Obama says the war will take years, they mean that when the jihadi nuts get out of line and go into a place they're not supposed to and loot it, they'll be bombed there just to keep them in line. It's like hurting them. Coming up, every day or two, I see new reports that are incredibly politically correct, where groups of black teens play the knockout game inside grocery stores, inside malls, and even on video, say, get that white person, get them for no reason, and it's not decried as racial. No one says it's wrong or bad. So these young teenagers actually think it's okay. I mean, if a group of 100 white people ran around beating up 100 black people or something, I would totally be blown away by it and would speak out against it, and have. But it's not the case when black folks do it because of political correctness, which is meant to shut down people's normal instincts. I got to say something, though. You always see this type of stuff happen at night, and that's the time I carry a gun. Like, I'm just going to start carrying a gun at all times. I mean, if 100 people wanted to beat me down like Reginald Denny and beat my head in, I don't care if it's a group of black people or white people, I'm going to start shooting. Of course, you wouldn't have to shoot anybody if somebody just pulled a gun out. I mean, do you see 100 people attacking a cop? No, because the cop's got a gun. And imagine living in Chicago where, see, I'm already going there. I'm going to cover this in the next segment. Getting back to the big enchilada issue, Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is just the CIA, this has been declassified back in the mid-90s, database name. In Arabic, it means the base. The database of Wahhabist jihadis worldwide. In the Caucasus, in Chechnya, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar. I mean, this is congressional hearings. The name Al-Qaeda is from the CIA. And by the way, Al-Qaeda operates as the globalist, Spectre, Chaos, the Illuminati, whatever you want to call it, as their destabilization secret army force, as their Cobra base. Shikari Jackson made that Cobra intro. We ought to play that coming back. They are the destabilizers within the system so the system can come in and take over. And here's the issue. I know most of you know that better than I. What do we do about it now? Because last year, this time, they were going to back Al-Qaeda with air raids on the main military bases of the Syrian government, who attacked nobody, who's in a defensive posture with a secular military, who are angels compared to Muammar Gaddafi, and then he's an angel compared to Al-Qaeda. I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, Gaddafi's like a 3, Al-Qaeda's a 10, Assad's a 1. Literally, you could go there, be a tourist. They were letting everybody in. They were starting to work with the West. What's the answer? Here comes 200,000 Al-Qaeda people to chop your heads off, 60+% of the main force. Now, you talk about immoral. Our military finally got upset This got decompartmentalized because our military knew, and I've had Tosh Plumley, CIA on. Congress has confirmed it. Look it up. And I've got other sources. Colonel Schaefer's coming on. Schaefer was on 3 days after. He's coming on this week. He was on 3 days after Benghazi and said it was basically an assassination of the ambassador to cover up the arms transfer. And he basically started naming Turkey, and turned out Turkish ambassador was there. And then he got called in and chewed out so bad he had to walk it back a little bit on air. But we told you exactly what really happened at the time. Now generals go on Fox News and admit it. Now it's in AP and AFP today in a government report. So I'm not saying, oh, I'm great, toot my horn. I'm saying we were right. Now, what are we going to do about this? Because Al-Qaeda, renamed ISIS, they'll name it something else next week, the Caliphate, IS, they'll flip it to confuse you because it's so embarrassing. So Obama is being forced to bomb some of these ISIS forces who are all fighting with each other as well. It isn't that our government runs them. It's they've armed them, protected them, and opened the door. That's what they've done. It's like knowing wolves are in the woods that are hungry, and you go, put a baby out in the woods and dump pig blood on them, hoping the wolves come eat them. You're an accomplice. Do you run the wolves? No. But you put the baby out for the wolves to eat them. You provided them. And you gave the wolves their teeth. So here is the headline out of French news agency. Property of U.S. government, Islamic State jihadists armed with U.S. military weapons from Benghazi. And finishing on this issue, Obama comes out and says, now it's going to take years to defeat ISIS. So Al-Qaeda had been defeated. They'd been reduced down to nothing after a decade-plus war with them. Real U.S. troops getting killed, real coalition forces getting killed, as the cover to sit on top of the opium, hundreds of billions a year, trillions in no-bid weapons contracts, $15 million blue tarps. It used to, a toilet seat was $800 as a way to siphon money off when it really cost $10. Well, now it's $15 million for a blue tarp that Halliburton puts up. So we're all thinking about the war. No. Al-Qaeda is being funded and allowed to operate and has now been resuscitated. They finally got rid of that Frankenstein and then only created 1,000 more. And then they do things like torture Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And that's back in the news today. And people are like, well, what? You're not for torturing Al-Qaeda? They get us to give up our morals because Jack Bauer tortures people for a decade every night on 24. And it's always to, save everybody, of course. It always turns out to be a good to torture. Meanwhile, it turns out that the people they would torture from Al-Qaeda have been basically double agents, and that they didn't want the public to ever learn about that, and they wanted them to confess. So they even confessed to bombing buildings that weren't even built when he was arrested. He was waterboarded for, 5 years off and on? Then they threatened to torture his son. There's the headline. CIA tortured al-Qaeda suspects close to the point of death by drowning them in water-filled baths. That's in the London Telegraph today. Well, that's old news. Back when they thought they could sell the idea, that was the corruption of America, they would admit on television that, well, we've taken the gloves off. We're working on the dark side. We're torturing these people. When all they were doing was torturing people that knew too much, or torturing people they needed to then confess so they could sell a fake narrative of 9/11. We attacked Iraq when 15 of the hijackers came from Saudi Arabia. So see how easy it is to understand what happened on 9/11 13 years later, this Thursday, when we see Al-Qaeda openly armed in Syria for 4 years. They were the only major fighting force. It's Saudi Arabia. It's jihadi. They want to kill the Shiite Alawite government, Christian coalition government. They want to go in there and kill everyone. I mean, the inner Muslim fighting is 10 times even the dislike of Israel or Christians. It is so intense. And who's the main driver? The radical Shiites in Saudi Arabia, the radical Sunnis in Saudi Arabia, who are dedicated to hunting down even moderate Shiites and killing them. And because this is somewhat of a complex issue, the public can't grasp it, and the government and the system knows it. I just mixed the two up, trying to describe it. If American men knew as much about the world and religions and geopolitical systems as they knew about the defensive line of the Dallas Cowboys or the UT Longhorns or the LSU Tigers, we would be in a free country and the system couldn't get away with this. But it thinks we're so dumb that it's even come out that in Iraq, in Turkey, in northern Israel, in Jordan, in Qatar, our government, the British government, the French government, our commandos trained and armed the cadres to then go create brigades after brigades, more than 40 brigades, some estimates are that high, of al-Qaeda, to then have them organize and invade Syria and now turn back around and invade Iraq to create that new al-Qaeda-sponsored base. And they only bomb them when the public learns about it. And some of the media is hyping it to promote the war on terror, so Obama is forced to do some limited bombing to make it look like they're trying to stop them. So even the political system can't coordinate its lies. Meanwhile, our military has been freaking out for several years, exposing this, saying we don't want to arm these people. They're going to end up attacking the United States. This is immoral to turn these countries over with Christians in them and to let these murdering animals run around and blow up every mosque and church that isn't part of their system and crucify and chop the heads off of even children. So the reason I harp on this so much is that if this ever gets out, which is starting to, it's already gotten out in our military because they've been fighting these people, so they know the players. They understand the names and the region and the history. So the military is awake by the prima facie fact that they have been to these places. They have fought these people. They know what these flags mean. They know who these people are. So the military is just freaking out right now, giving arms, weapons, impads to these folks, and now the facade is collapsing. And I don't know what the establishment is going to do, because as it comes out that al-Qaeda, IS, is being run out of Washington, D.C., and run out of NATO headquarters in Europe, as that comes out, and that Israel is working with them, that's come out in the Israeli papers. As all of that comes out, we're all having a moral debate now. Are we going to openly support al-Qaeda? Are we going to openly be this evil and to sow this type of discord and mass murder? Because if we don't speak out against it, if we don't say no to it, we're part of it. So now Rand Paul has come out and said that he supports airstrikes on ISIS. And I, in spirit, agree with that, but you can't come out and say that without pointing out that our government helped arm them, which Rand Paul did as well. And that's why I support what he's saying. If we repent of this, if we have an open discussion of it, if we admit it, and then destroy it, that would be this country taking a moral course. But they don't want to do that. They're going to let ISIS, known as al-Qaeda in Iraq previously, take over the entire Middle East, Africa, you name it. There is a global offensive being launched by radical Sunni Islamicists in Central Africa, Western Africa, Northern Africa, in the Philippines, in Indonesia, in Central Asia, in Pakistan, all over the world. And that's why I've said I expect ISIS attacks to happen in Europe or to happen in the Middle East using MPADs, shooting down aircraft. Unless we make it a big issue, then the politicos will try to actually use the intelligence agencies to stop them. But if we just let them attack and don't expose the establishment, they'll spin it and use that to take our liberties. We can use the enemy's propaganda push with al-Qaeda, known as ISIS, against them, saying you're behind it, you're involved, you're going to let them attack, our borders are open, so that A, we can put pressure on securing the borders, but B, force the system to roll up al-Qaeda. But Obama's statement, I'm going to play it in a moment, that, oh no, this is going to go on for years, meaning into the next administration, means that they're planning to launch this even bigger worldwide and use this clash of civilizations to take our freedoms away. So let's go ahead and play that clip of President Obama coming out and saying this will take years. Here it is.
This is not going to be an announcement about U.S. ground troops. This is not the equivalent of the Iraq War.
All right, we're going to actually find that clip because we had it in the computer, and I think it skipped ahead to a part here, but I can read you the quote. Obama's long ISIS war, it will take years and kill thousands. Continuation of creative destruction under the War on Terror banner. The New York Times, long the preferred conduit for war propaganda, has laid out Obama's plan to defeat ISIS, a.k.a. the Islamic State, in Iraq and Syria. And then it goes on with his quote saying it will take years. But the issue here is that the decision has been made to split Iraq in three parts, give Kurdistan to the Kurds in the north, give the east into the southeast to Iran, and to give that western area into Syria, western area of Iraq into eastern Syria to Islamic State and allow them to operate. They let them get the arms, build up, come in their convoys. They could have been taken out right then as they massed. They allowed them to overrun and to get infrastructure and dams and all the electricity and weapons they need. And they tried to spin it that, oh, they seized U.S. weapons caches at bases in Iraq, as if our military just left these weapons there waiting for them to come overrun it and get it. But in the new report that's in AFP, they admit that, no, the weapons were given directly to the rebels in Syria, which is this same group. But they're trying to spin it, saying ISIS got it from those rebels. No, they got it directly in Benghazi and in other weapons caches that were turned over to Islamic State, a.k.a. al-Qaeda. Property of U.S. government, Islamic State jihadists armed with U.S. military weapons. French news agency. Islamic State fighters appear to be using captured U.S. military-issued arms and weapons supplied to moderate rebels in Syria, report finds. None of those rebels were moderate. Islamic State fighters appear to be using captured U.S. military-issued arms and weapons supplied to moderate rebels in Syria by Saudi Arabia, according to a report published on Monday. The study by the London-based small arms research organization, Conflict Armament Research, documented weapons seized by Kurdish forces from militants in Iraq and Syria over a 10-day period. This was back in July. The report said the jihadists disposed of significant quantities of U.S.-made small arms, including M16 assault rifles, included in photos showing the markings, property of U.S. government. It also found that anti-tank rockets used by IS in Syria were identical to M79 rockets transferred by Saudi Arabia to forces operating under the Free Syrian Army umbrella in 2013. Basically, tow missiles. Here is the actual AFP article if you're watching us on television. So now They've got generals on Fox News going, well, we helped create ISIS, so now we've got to take them out. They're not taking them out. If they paint outside the numbers, if they don't do what they're told and go kill every Christian there's found and blow up every non-radical Muslim mosque and kill the Iraqi Defense Forces, if they go into Kurdish areas where they've got EU oil deals and Chinese oil deals, the Western powers have divided Iraq in 3 pieces. And Iran's been told, give up some of your weapons, play ball with us. We'll let you have your own little Shiite wonderland there again in eastern Iraq. So I've spent most of the hour on this. That's what's going on. And the reason we're down at the border showing it's wide open is because, again, there's stage terror, there's provocateur terror, then there's terror where they arm them and open the door up and let a real terrorist group attack. And that's what's going on. And there's a good chance they're getting us ready for an ISIS attack here in the United States. And I just want to point out that the criminals that run our government were behind it. You know, I'm really just hand-wringing here on air because there's a lot of good stuff happening. Our military's woken up to the fact that we are arming al-Qaeda, and then they've got to get killed fighting them. Because you have to understand, even the low-level jihadis, they don't know either what's going on. They're compartmentalized. They were brought up with no education in many cases out in the middle of the desert or the mountains. Still others are weird, spoiled brats from England, the U.S., and Europe who have wealthy families and who want to go out and be adventurers or something. You know, some people go and get into UFC, MMA type stuff to have fun and adventure. Some people become cops. Some people, you know, start rock climbing. Well, some people go and they join al-Qaeda. But see, it's okay to join al-Qaeda now because they've given it a nice name like IS. And now the British government says, oh, we need to let them operate on Facebook and Twitter and let them come back to England. They're not bad boys. They really mean well. See, it's all how the media spins it. But ISIS is committing so many horrible atrocities, it's backfiring. And there are some people in the power structure that do want to take them out. So you're seeing some propaganda that is pushing for striking them. If you want to strike ISIS, you need to remove the Saudi Arabian government, who is behind all this to a great extent. It's the main engine of it, but then you're back to British intelligence. Now, coming up in the next hour, I'm going to get into the economy, the Second Amendment, a Washington Post article, stop and seize. Aggressive police take hundreds of millions of dollars from motorists not charged with crimes, not caught with drugs. That ties in with former New Orleans mayor sentenced to 10 years in prison for all sorts of criminal activity. Okay, well, if he's going to go to jail, what about the Federal Reserve money laundering billions of dollars a month? That's been in the mainstream news. See, I love how they'll burn some low-level official because, see, that doesn't threaten the whole power structure. But they won't go after the big banks that run the drug aircraft, that run the torture rings. Oh, yeah, it's come out that the bank aircraft for Wells Fargo, but Warren Buffett's such a nice man, and Wachovia were used to fly drugs and weapons back and forth, and then also were involved in rendition. But he's a nice old man. He eats ice cream cones on TV. He owns Dairy Queen, so everything's okay. By the way, he's a serious gangster. I don't even like talking about him, but I have to. This is the type of stuff we're dealing with, ladies and gentlemen, and being naive only makes things get worse.
Celebrate the spirit of freedom and liberty upon which our nation was founded at InfoWarsShop.com. Molon Lave is ancient Greek for come and take it. This popular design combines both classic Greek Spartan imagery with modern M16 assault rifles. Now available in women's tees and proudly made in the USA. And now you can protect yourself from corrupt cops with the InfoWars dash cam. It's your car's black box that records all that the driver sees and hears. And introducing the Block It Pocket. It renders your phone undetectable while protecting your private data and your health. Or take back your privacy and protect your personal information by getting your very own Detractor cell phone pouch. So get incredibly high-quality, freedom-based products and help fund the revolution at InfoWarsShop.com.